Recording started.
Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's Matrexit discussion group call for tactical sovereignty. This wonderful Sunday, seventh day of the week. No, not the seventh. That was yesterday. This is the first day of the week, not the seventh, not the Sabbath. And I was just chit chatting here with a friend of ours, Ken, and co host Keith, and actually just talking about real estate licensure. Those little language pathologists have to have a license for it.
Yeah, that's one of those interesting things that we come across when we do our deep research. When we go down these rabbit holes and we're studying specific content, and when we start studying each of those different things, like the lawyers or attorneys' responsibilities and what they can and can't do, we do the same thing with realtors and clerk of court hearing. When we get to realtors, we find out that the term qualified is actually defined as a speech pathology requirement. And that's under the real estate and direct sellers section of Title 20, which is employee benefits. So, as an employee of the federal government, which means all entities of the government of the United States, including the United States Postal Service and the Postal Regulatory Commission, we find out that you've got to be part of a contract there. And if you're not, then what are they pushing? They're really pushing that under that real estate agent. When we look at the term qualified, that they're supposed to have a speech pathology background. I dropped a link for it in the chat section, and I'm going to go ahead and jump on it real quick and read a section of it.
All right, cool.
And of course, Title 20, like I said, is employee benefits, which is Chapter 3, Social Security Administration under the Federal Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance. This is Subpart K, employment, wages, self-employment, and self-employment income. And then this is in regards to your Social Security Administration, of course. And so anyone who's got a Social Security number is under that Federal Old Age Survivors and Disabilities Insurance. That's the main insurance that promulgates all this. And under it says A, trade or business. And we already know that the term trade or business under Title 26 of the U.S. Code, which is the tax code, is defined as the performance of the functions of the public office. So already we know that you're supposed to technically have an oath of office. Not only do we have a real estate agent that's out there with a license, but it doesn't have an oath of office. I guarantee you none of these people took an oath of office according to that term, trade or business, which means you're performing the functions of public office. And if you perform services after 1982 as a qualified real estate agent or a direct seller, as defined in Section 3508 of the Code, you are considered to be engaging in trade or business. And then when we look up the term qualified as it relates to the real estate agent, it's one of those terms in Cornell that they got blue line highlighted, telling you that they got a specific definition for that term. So when we click on that definition for that term, which comes from 20 CFR 404.1502, and I'll drop that link in the chat as well. And it says qualified is qualified speech language pathologist for speech or language impairments only. So it doesn't matter whether the customer that you have may or may not have a speech issue, some kind of speech problem. What it's presenting is that as a real estate agent, you have to be prepared in case you have a buyer or seller that does have such a speech impediment, and you have to be able to deal with that. And in order to deal with that, you're supposed to be qualified in speech language pathology. That's all that's saying. And it says for this source, qualified means that the speech language pathologist must be licensed by the state professional licensing agency or be fully certified by the state education agency in the state in which he or she practices or holds a certificate of clinical competence in speech language pathology from the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Pretty wild, huh?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to take a look at what they have to take there and see what all it directly relates to. But yeah, as far as licensure goes and an oath goes, I'm pretty sure they take an ascribed oath.
Right.
I'm
And that's
positive of that.
yeah, and that's in relation to the commercial treaties at hand as well. That's a basic reason that they take those oaths. Any oath of office is actually a commercial oath, in fact. It's all done through maritime insurances. And there's that other link for the other code there where that qualified is. And you'll see it starts out with acceptable medical source, laboratory findings, non-medical source, symptoms, we us and we us and or we or us means as appropriate, either the Social Security Administration or the state agency making the disability or blindness determination. Pretty wild stuff. And that's why I say we do our research and we come across those kind of codes that just blow your mind. When you read 7 U.S. Code 1922, you find out that a real estate loan can only be had with the intent of being a fish farmer. That's the way the plain writing is written, and that's the only ones that those real estate loans are supposed to be applying to.
Huh. So right there, okay, they're making you fishers of men, huh?
Exactly. Well, and not only that, but the homes. Everybody thinks these homes that they're buying and selling. Technically, those are supposed to be tenant homes, and that's why you have tenant and owner listed. And even if you buy a home and you think you're the owner, there's a document out there where they're going to list you as a tenant in accordance to the mortgage. And when we find out all these different terms and how they're actually playing in that commercial person, you can actually operate in that system with a commercial person. You just have to know which one's which.
Yeah.
And it's like we
And,
talked before, you got to know what hat you're wearing.
and even their term residential is still referring to commercial. So if you think that you are in a purely residential, well, you might want to go and look up what that really means.
Yeah, well, the term resident means no person shall reside in the zone except federal, state, or local, federal, state, or municipal officers or agents whose residence presence is deemed necessary by the board. And like Bryan said, it's all commerce. That resident presence deemed necessary by the board. The board itself is the Secretary of Commerce as the chair of the board, and then the Secretary of Treasury. If you haven't been before that board, make that resident presence being deemed necessary, then it never happened. If you didn't qualify it by your own handwriting in a statement of intent under penalty of perjury, and then sign it in wet ink, it's not true.
Where did you see that definition for resident?
That's 19 U.S. Code 81, no space, no parenthesis, nothing, lowercase o. Just 81O, lowercase. 19 U.S. Code 81O.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've just always, you look at the different words and, I guess you can twist them and turn them into meaning just about anything you want. And a lot of people do that. But knowing that everything that they're doing is really operating through trust, and you look at that word resident, and what's res? Res is property.
Yep.
And the second half of the word is ident. So you're identifying as trust property.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're identifying as trust property in a public trust. And that's why the inclusion of you in that record is assumption that you're operating as a trustee, just like everybody else.
Right. And that's essentially where I say, when people talk about like individual trusts or whatever, it's too much of a headache. They're not good enough. or staffed adequately enough to be able to be running trusts on every single individual out there. But I say it's really that public trust that you hear about all the time. I refer to that as the public pool that everybody pees in.
Oh yeah, get cozy and get warm. Huddle close. Pee on everybody.
Well, I had an interesting conversation with Micah Dent a couple days ago. I don't know if you caught that or not. Um, right
Oh
now,
no,
there's a strike on my YouTube channel, so as soon as that gets lifted, I'll go and post that up to the Tactical Sovereignty YouTube as well.
huh? Yeah, I was thinking he was going to be on here, but I know he's been on before, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been on a couple times before, and it is listed in the menu. It's the podcast just before this one, number 302. But it seems like so often it can be kind of difficult. If I'm just talking to somebody one on one, they call me up, hey, I've got some questions, can we talk? And by the time you get done running through everything, just the very, very basics alone is 2.5, 3 hours. You know what I mean? And so when you get in a conversation with somebody that is kind of scheduled for an hour, and so many people, especially when they're new into starting to figure these things out and stuff like that, and I was the same way in the beginning also. You're expecting to have a quick and simple answer to just about every question that you might throw out there. But you quickly learn it's way deeper than that. And because they put things beneath layers, beneath layers, beneath layers.
I was going to say, yeah, it's that onion thing.
Yeah.
There's so many layers, and the deeper you get, the more you're going to cry.
Yeah, it takes time to peel that stinky onion apart. I mean, and you're bringing up oaths regarding real estate a little bit ago. And that's one of the things as well that, I have a lot of people that freak out because you might get information like from a lawyer's group or something like that. Oh, you can't listen to them, they're liars. It's like, no. When they're talking to each other, they're telling the truth. They have to because they know the truth. You know what I mean? And, there's also avenues that you can use out there where you'll even find out different things from various Jesuits that they'll even spill things here and there. And when it comes to the oaths, to me, this is one of the other little interesting onions to peel back too, is that so many times everybody is told, and it seems like any situation, people throw a question out on social media or whatever about going to court, and they're always told the same thing. Number one, you go in under special appearance, you know, and then some people tell them, oh, you got to pull the judge's bond and you got to get his oath. And I see those things and I just kind of shake my head because number one, it seems like whenever anybody's told, to appear under special appearance, that's all they're told about it. They don't learn anything further from that in that aspect. And if you research what special appearance is for, special appearance is strictly to question jurisdiction. And a lot of times people will tell people to question jurisdiction, but they also leave it right there at that because there's many levels. I mean, there's an easy 7 or 8 levels to jurisdiction. Um, there's 3 or 4 that apply to pretty much every case, but people aren't even really told those. So when I hear people say you'll question jurisdiction, it's like, okay, good. Which jurisdiction are you going to question? Are you going to question the in personam jurisdiction? Are you going to question subject matter jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction? Like, are you going to question the venue? I mean, yeah, myself, I think the venue would be probably one of the number one options for questioning jurisdiction. Because if you even want to look at state or federal constitution, it says that you have the right to a public hearing. Okay, good. Uh, how come is it that You go to a courtroom and they'll have a little sign on the door that says, um, no cameras, turn your cell phone off or it will be confiscated, these lists of do's and don'ts. Well, the reason why they can do that is because this is not a public hearing. You are in a private venue. And you can even look them up on Manta. It'll tell you, this is a privately held company. Well, if it's a privately held company, it's definitely not a public hearing, is it?
Correct. And that's why they don't let their proprietary information out, like in their court registry investment systems and stuff.
Right.
I want you to know those trade secrets.
Yeah,
Particularly your trade name they're trading. You got to keep that secret.
yeah. But I mean, as far as even oaths, I mean, I remember, I think it was Franco Collins that talking about the oaths, and the idea was basically, wait a minute, what are you doing questioning jurisdiction and then demanding to see an oath? Because if they're going to furnish an oath for you, then they're validating jurisdiction. So you just shot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, that's why.
Right.
And that's why I say I don't question jurisdiction or anything like that. I let it be known in on and for the record what the jurisdiction truly is: exculpatory and supplemental, and of course it's a variance at law for difference, fundamental difference in nature, and in the nature of the thing, it is superior to the reference of a living soul. Nothing else can supersede that. Your commercial market is void.
I remember a friend of mine here a couple years ago was helping some people with debt collections. And I ran an idea past him, and they went and used it because he went and looked up the other party as far as how their business was set up and everything. And it was an attorney firm that was actually located in another county. And you went back and looked at the collection agency they were supposedly working for, and it actually traced all the way back to London, England. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, no
But
kidding.
yeah, he used, I mean, since it's commercial, they use that little thing in the court. He said, well, he said, I've got a DBA. I'm registered to do business in this county. I just want to make sure all the parties involved here are registered to do business in this county because we are doing business here, aren't we?
Exactly. Yeah, you
And
need everybody to update their records so everybody that's particular to the case is allowed to sue and be suable.
yep, that's called standing. When people ask, I mean, I have a lot of people, it kind of surprise me. They're like, "What does standing mean?" Well, that right there is one level of standing. That shows that you are authorized to be doing what you're doing, where you're doing it at. And this firm that they were dealing with, they actually they're registered to do business in a neighboring county. They weren't registered to do business in the county they were in, and so that case kind of fell apart pretty quickly for them, fortunately. And
Yeah,
I'm sure a more knowing attorney or better practice attorney probably could have rolled past it, but
yeah. Well, and that's why I always point out that definition of resident. It points out clearly that you first have to have taken an oath, just like the real estate agent has to first have a speech pathology degree or something. And these are things that are all conducted for trade or business according to the tax code. That one element is had by all of the residents from a local community, and that is a misdescription that can be corrected. And that's the only thing we really need to do is correct that record.
yeah,
It'll
I've heard that
it'll
a number of times with people coming in and they want to know, the standing of each and every single party involved, right up to the prosecutor and the judge. I want to know who everybody is here.
yeah, and that's as to the accuracy of the record, which is a must. The record must reflect accurately. And so when we start demanding that stuff, that's when they start shaking in their boots because now they know they've been had. It no longer
Yeah.
matters about the discovery process. We're going to start before the discovery process and do the identification, make sure that all parties identified are truly, in fact, identifiable as to their capacity and standing.
Well, there's another aspect to the whole oath thing too. I think gets missed or just not totally comprehended by everybody, and that is that when an oath is taken, um, it's described by a public official, notary, whatever the case may be, and whoever is taking that oath is taking that oath to a specific entity. And in the situation of say, an attorney, when they take their oath, it's to the courts and to the state, and to the bar. Guess what? There is no oath of public officials for an oath to, say, for instance, specifically the citizens.
No, it's to the trust. It's to the trust in that sense. And this is what people don't realize. When you start naming third-party interveners and stuff, or start recognizing them or cognizing them before your eyes when you present these documents, when you're able to do that and realize what the trust is or what the trusts are, because a lot of times there's going to be several trusts operating there, and that's what it's truly about. The contracts, they're trying to get everybody involved in as if though everybody's a trustee. Therefore, it's always operating in trust. A contract cannot be issued without a trust supporting it unless it's truly, truly private. And so when they start naming that trust and is always a public trust, that proves that there's some kind of breach of privacy unless one has full knowledge and consent, and therefore is able to identify those parts himself. So when party comes in and starts asking questions about being identified, they know they're kind of squirreled up then. That's one of the first elements of any trust, folks, identification.
Yep, you have to know who the parties are that are being dealt with. I mean, just like a ball game, you know who it is that's up to bat next. You've seen the batting list, you've seen the schedule for them. You know who's playing first. You know who's playing third. You know who's pitching. I mean, everything. It's full disclosure. Everything's put out there.
Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third.
Yep. Yep. But so, I mean, that's one of the things I think people need to realize. You're asking for an oath. Number one, all you're doing is legitimizing the office. And number two, it really makes no difference whatsoever because the trust was not to you. Or not the trust, but, well, even the trust. But the oath was not to you.
Right.
And that's what people don't realize. I mean, I had somebody kind of message me the other day getting on me about the whole we the people idea. And it's like, I'm sorry, you are not we the people. We the people, that was a compact. That was a contract. I know who they were. Flip it over and look and see who signed it. That'll show who we the people are.
Yep. And that's why that trust law is so important to know. Once you realize that when they operate these trusts that they're taking an oath to, and look at those. I just recently did a little video and talked about the memorandum of agreement between the Social Security Administration and the Census Bureau. And we find out that it includes, of course, the Department of Commerce. And of course, that's because it's mainly just a commercial construct for financial gain. And the beneficiaries are, of course, again, the Social Security Administration and the Census Bureau. And of course, they're going to pay the Department of Commerce to set it all up. And that's what the Bureau of Vital Statistics is all about with that birth registration. You're part of that contract by a name in their record that's been misdescribing you your entire life. That's a false trust.
Yeah, or at the very least, it's a constructive trust, which technically doesn't qualify as a trust, but it's the same idea. It's the same format that they use across the board.
But in that constructive trust, all the parties still have to be identified first, and that's what they're not doing. They're just doing it all on presumption that the guy that they're going to call up to the stand is going to stand there and plead guilty because that's who they called. And that's the difference. We've got to realize that we're not that person on that paper. And when we start realizing that first element of identification and questioning that, then we can start making our own presentation of where that jurisdiction really is and why their jurisdictions do not apply. And that brings it in as not questioning the jurisdiction, but like I said earlier, bringing in those supplemental facts of nature that prove that it's impossible. I didn't create that person. The state did. I can't control it. Or it's not mine. Therefore, there is a distinct difference. I don't care what that difference is, but here's many elements that show that it is difference. Personal jurisdiction, I didn't create it. Subject matter jurisdiction, I don't know the code. Territorial jurisdiction, I come from the kingdom of heaven. I know nothing less. You know, and this is how we realize that their code is nothing but their language to entrap people in it because they give them some kind of general education, and then people think they're intelligent. And then
it's like one girl. She got all the head spinning in court because they asked her to step forward, if this was her name or whatever, and she said the trustees are present and the beneficiary has been named. That's all she said. Yeah, everybody's like looking around and who? What was that?
Yeah, exactly. And the beneficiary isn't in that document, and that proves a portion of the trust is in fact protecting the beneficiary by leaving it unnamed. So therefore, the trust instrument before the court is still only naming trustees.
Yep. And there is no man there to defend or do anything. Even right down to the originating document of any court case, it's called the matrix of the case. Well, what is that word matrix? Matrix is nothing but two suffixes put together to form a word, or a prefix and a suffix put together to form a word. You've got MA, which is female, that's mother, and you've got trix, TRIX, that's female. That's the mom or the female as well. Just like you see the term executrix, it's a female who's executor of a trust. And I think it's hilarious the amount of places that you see the MA for the female or for the mother. I mean, you see that all over the place, and especially when you're looking at maritime or you look at marine. So many things in that world all has the MA in it. Marina.
Yeah.
All the things dealing with water.
Matrimony. Money.
Yep. All that stuff seems to have to deal with the female. And what have they tried to do? They're trying to do nothing ever since the beginning but silence the female. And I think we need to realize that really when you're looking in deeply into these things and what's really being identified, people are thinking sexually, they're thinking literally, male and female. When really it goes way deeper than that. It's a spiritual level. It's the construct of the mind, the female mind and the male mind. Is it an emotional way of thinking, or are you deducting what's going on and reasoning things out? You have to have that balance, and they do everything they can to throw that balance off, so that one of those elements are not present. They're going to use the MA, they're going to use the female, they're going to use the mother with everything, but then they go and silence it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they do. That's the Social Security Administration. That's the public health and welfare system, which doesn't talk about men too many times. And its specific purpose specifically mentions women and children and doesn't include men anywhere.
Well, and I'll tell you one thing that it definitely never identifies. It never uses the word family.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's always been the enemy. Get rid of the family structure. They never have any law regarding the word family. I've looked. I'd love to have somebody show me a law that they found that has the word family in it.
Well, and I think HUD might be the only one, Title 24. But again, that's in accordance to public lands and public welfare and that kind of stuff. So it's still public. And that's
Right.
what you see multifamily. So it's I don't know if it's singular by itself, but generally you can see it hyphenated with another pronoun before it.
Right. Yeah. And it's hyphenated, like it really doesn't quite exactly belong there. And even looking at that term "public" that you brought up, this is one of the big misfortunes of people that they don't comprehend. Because people start learning and they come into this field of learning, into this, call it legal society, because it really is. I can identify that for you in a bit. But you come in studying the things within the legal society, and you bring the frickin' baggage from the streets with you, and you're trying to use those things that you learned in school or whatever as far as your baseline to comprehend things. So when you're seeing the word public, you're thinking, oh, that's all of us. That's all the
Yeah,
citizens, that's all the people, when that could not be further from the truth.
yeah.
The public is very specific.
That's same with the word man as well. Man is still a personal pronoun, guys. Same with public and private. There's really no distinction. It's still in personage. Genesis 2:7, God formed man of the dust of the ground, and he breathed the breath of life into his nostrils. The man became a living soul. Everything that they're categorizing and classifying and everything in that public record or private records, whatever it is, it's still a categorization of a personal pronoun, first and foremost, all cases.
Well, to further unwrap that whole public thing, people need to realize, and when you start looking at things through this lens, things start making more sense to you. Is that when you're hearing that word public, and protecting and serving the public, a public officer, a public trustee, those kind of sayings, we need to realize that the public that's being referred to are the agents and officers of the state. That is who the public is. And when the regular population, that Hamilton referred to as the unwashed masses, when those people are being referred to, you'll hear the term general public being used.
Yep.
The general public is just anybody. But when just the word public is being used, it's being used for a specific reason. It's for a specific group of people. And those are the people that are agencies, officers, or assigns of the state. And, if you wonder about that, go down to your public park. If that's just for every Joe Blow out and around to come use, how come it's got a list of 20 rules up there? How come it only opens at a certain time in the morning and closes at a certain time of night? There's all these rules for the public park. Well, if it's public and wide open for everybody to use, which evidently it's not, then it must belong to somebody. And who's it belong to? It belongs to the public. And the public is the one that makes all those rules and sets the opening and closing time. Those are the officers and agencies of the state. That's who the public is. But people, when, if you still watch TV or listen to like even little news blurbs on the radio, listen for that term general public. You're going to start hearing it pop up now that I've mentioned it. It's kind of like that whole yellow VW story. You never see one until you own one. Once you own a yellow VW, you start seeing them everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the system's kind of wired in a certain way, and if people don't understand it, they get caught up in the various different mechanisms, which again is right back to the verbiage, the words. Everybody thinks they're an individual or a resident or even a man. When we realize we've been calling ourselves each other man all of our life, and then take a look at that scripture, Genesis 2:7 that it just spoke on. It clearly says man became a living soul. So, in that fact, shouldn't we be recognizing each other as living souls, responsible thereto unto each other and to God, just like we ought to? Again, proving that the definition of man is just a personal identifier. Therefore, it's just some kind of little personal pronoun. That's all it is.
Well, that just comes back to what I think is the attorney's favorite pastime, and everybody, points at the word "attorn" and what the word "attorn" means. You need to go a step further than that, because you go further into that line of thought, and what they really like doing is reclassifying things. And so instead of man being one thing, oh, they're going to reclassify it into something else. Even that term individual, that term individual, it gets reclassified with every section of United States Code that it's in. If you're looking at 26 USC talking about taxes, within the IRC, within the Internal Revenue Manual, Internal Revenue Code, you're going to find that individual there has its own definition all over again. It's defined as taxpayer. You go somewhere else, and the word individual is used, and it's going to be looked at a totally different way, just depending on the circumstances that it's being used in. Reclassification.
That's different grammar styles that I talk about. This jurisdiction will use this grammar style. This jurisdiction will use a different grammar style. But all encompassed, they're supposed to be plain writing. And so that's what we should be going by. If you can't find the plain writing in these documents and these laws and codes and stuff, then maybe you should think about going back and getting concise English handbook and starting all over. That's where it's at. Comprehending the plain writing that's right before your eyes. And like I stated earlier with that CFR 404.1065, those terms are what qualifies a real estate agent or direct seller. And that specifically talks about a speech pathology degree. If you didn't know that you're supposed to have a speech pathology degree to have a real estate broker's license, and also according to the terms and conditions be conducting trade or business, and therefore also need a oath of office, can you truly, in fact, in on and for that record, be a truly duly qualified real estate agent? No. So everything you've bought and sold in real estate is not qualified either, correct? By technicality, you would be right. It doesn't qualify.
Okay, Keith, one of the
expunge the record.
Yeah. Well, one of the words you brought up, which people wouldn't realize it, but it's actually a term. When something is a term, that just means it's been reclassified for the use of the legal society. But one of the words that you used a little bit ago was that word "this." Mm-hmm. And I remember going over some information from the Informer here a few years ago, one of the documents that he had written, and he was looking at, I think it was code in the state of North Carolina. And he was going through it, and he's reading it, and he's like, whoa, 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 hold on a minute here. Hold on a second. Because in this sentence here, it's mentioning this state, and this is lowercase. And so a couple sentences later, it's saying in this state, and this is now capitalized. So what's up with the word this? What's up with this word, those are the things that stand out to you and show you that there's a there there's something happening. And even to them, there's a difference between this state and this state. The same as a difference with the United States of America and the United States of America.
Yeah, Bill Clinton did that little scheme in court where he said, well, that would depend on what your definition of is. And when you look at that statement and find out that the word is has like 21 different connotations that can be used for.
All right.
He made a perfect point.
Well, I think what Billy was doing there is he was going and uh, kind of exposing something without exposing something, and essentially saying to the courts, "Do you want to get into these details? Because I'd be happy to." You know,
Yep.
and that they kind of shut that down right away. No, no, that's not something they wanted to talk about.
Yep.
Uh, it's like the attorney Jerry Spence. I'd love some of the information that he puts out. I don't know if he's still doing it or not. He had retired and he had bought an old barn and remodeled the inside of it. And in the upstairs, he was having his own classes for attorneys, kind of one-on-one classes. Well, it wasn't one-on-one; it'd be maybe 10 or 15 people and then him. But one of his favorite statements that, again, I've even used it once or twice because it's a fun statement to use. But one of the fun statements that he liked using was the statement, "I have reason to believe." And then he would go on to whatever. And when he said, "I have reason to believe," that said, to the judge or the other party, hey, he knows something here that everybody else isn't really aware of. Do we want him to make everybody aware of this?
Exactly. And that's why I try to get people to realize the simple point of one of the easiest resolutions we could probably do is correction of the record. Because the record is in fact in error once you realize some of these terms and conditions and how they in fact do not apply to you. And therefore your inherent duty is to help correct that record for that misapplication and misdescription.
Yep, yep. Because there's definitely a whole lot of things that they won't want on the record, and those are actually the things you should probably arm yourself with. Whereas, myself, I have noticed over the years that there's just endless amounts of stuff you can go through regarding, tactics in court and what to do with court, what not to do in court. It's endless, and any of those answers to any of those things are neither right nor wrong. It all really depends on what judicial administrator that you're standing in front of, and even with him, it depends on what day of the week it is for him you're standing in front of him. Things can change. I mean, you go right back to the Lieber Code. In the Lieber Code, they tell you, I know there's a statement in Article 6 of the Lieber Code, but basically they say in there that the standing army can decide what laws they want to follow, what ones they don't want to follow.
Yeah.
So really, with all these court tactics, there is nothing that's neither right nor necessarily wrong, and not everything is going to work all the time. In fact, some things may only work very rarely. So my attitude that I developed quite a while ago was, you know what? The best tactic to take is to get them to not even want you to be invited in. We don't want this person coming to our party, you know?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier to a friend about my stay in the jail this last time about 6 years ago. And what it was is when they first put me in there, because I'd had such a battle with them in court and I was really pushing this information, of course they called me sovereign citizen. So they put me in the segregated tank to keep me away from the population. Well, it wasn't but 3 days, and the guy that was running the day shift and his intercourse with myself talking about this stuff, he realized I didn't belong in segregation, so he put me in general population. So I spent the next part of my general population stay helping educate everybody on what was really happening. And that's part of why they don't want people like me in those systems. I'm going to start educating people. It's much harder to do it out here because people won't listen to you. They have no need to listen to you. They've got many different choices, and they're going to listen to what they think they're going to do anyway, whether it be a 1099 process, secured party credit, accepted for value, whatever. They're going to try all these different processes just because somebody else said they work. And so they're going to have the paper there, and they're going to think the paper's going to do all the work. Can't do that, folks. You got to do the research and go through the experience to learn how to operate yourself and learn how to best bring that to other people. Like I explained about feeding a man for a day if you give him a fish, but you feed him for a lifetime if you teach him how to fish. But the ultimate motive is to teach him well enough so that he can feed himself for a lifetime and pass that on to others. True inheritance that qualifies us as beneficiaries is the passing of knowledge. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I yield.
Well, I don't know about you, Keith. I mean, myself, I would much rather be in the SHU or the special housing unit, because to me, it's a lot more peaceful and a lot quieter, not being general population. Uh, my last time in, God, it's probably been 8 years now, but since it was close to the holidays and the judicial administrator overseeing my case was on vacation, I got to spend a couple weeks there. But as soon as they moved me there, uh, they if people don't know, people that have been there would maybe know, but you're gonna have maybe 2 or 3 floors in each little pod, and each floor, the cells are all gonna be facing the same direction, which is normally towards the center console that has like 4 pods around it. That way, whoever's in that center console, the guards or whatever, they can pretty much look in and see most of the inside of each pod. But anyway, I went in and they said, I was supposed to be up on the second tier, such and such a cell. Took my stuff, threw it in there. I wasn't there for half an hour. And I got called by the guards. I had to come down and talk to the guard that was on duty, the officer for that shift. And she said, what cell did you put yourself in? I told her. She said, no, you're supposed to be in this cell over here. She said, that means you're immediately, you haven't even been here for half an hour. You're immediately um, not following your commands. She said, so we're moving you to segregation.
Wow.
And that's kind of interesting. So, but I mean, it was nice. I was, I'm don't mind being alone. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, neither did I. It was his decision,
Yeah.
not mine. I wasn't begging.
especially, especially in a situation like that, I would rather be by myself than around 20, 30 other, you
Yep.
know, who knows what kind of, parts of society. But although, there are lots of, you know, broken people and needy people in every situation that needs some ministering to. But either way, I really have no problem with being in isolation at all. It's much more peaceful.
Yeah, I did a couple of spans of it when I was in prison back in 1980s, and it's one of the most peaceful times. You got the same humdrum dull hum of the lights and electricity flowing through the hallways and stuff, and a Bible to read and paper to write on. That's about it.
Yeah, you definitely get in some good quality reading time, that's for sure, especially if they've got some decent books on the cart for you.
Yeah, yeah. I was always reading things like Time magazine and shit.
Oh, now they had where I was, they had a lot of different like novels and things like that. Different like true
Yeah,
crime stories, different things. It was kind of interesting.
yeah. I remember my stay in the Waterloo or Waverly jail, and their library had a lot of the Louis L'Amour westerns, so I got into reading those.
Yeah. Louis L'Amour, actually, a lot of people don't realize it, and I'm not sure how many people even read that much anymore. But Louis L'Amour, in his stories, if because he's very descriptive in his stories when he talks about going down a trail that goes around a bend of a river, and you're at the bottom of this hill, and there's a great big huge boulder, right there at the base that you've got to squeeze around to continue on the trail. When he's saying stuff like that, you can go to the area that he's talking about, and he is exactly on. There
Yeah,
is the boulder right there. The trail does turn like that.
yeah.
So if people go and visit some of the places that he writes about, it's almost like being right there in the story that he was writing.
Oh yeah, that was like Mark Twain and Tom Sawyer. When he wrote those novels, it was because of his own personal experiences as Samuel Clemens.
Yeah. But he got that name actually from the riverboat rides that he had taken. Did you hear how he got that name, Mark Twain?
Mark Twain was a measurement.
Yep.
A twain was something like what, 20 feet?
Well, the twain was the twine. That was the twine, the measuring twine that they threw out. Yeah, and when they said to market, yeah, it was like every 20 feet or whatever. So he'd hear him yell out, Mark Twain. It's like, hey, that's kind of a cool name.
Yeah, he's one of the authors that I've done quite a bit of research on Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and all them novels and shit. And that's where I learned a lot of this stuff about the copyright, because he's got a actual case in Congress for generation skipping trust situation in regards to the copyright, because the Canadian market received his book first, and it was going to be a while before it hit the American markets, based upon the import contract. And so Canadian people bought it up for resale on American shelves before he got an opportunity to release it in America himself. And he said that
I know.
was, as a sneak behind because of international contracts. And they avoided their contract with the European country by going ahead and using a greater international law that said they could export their product into any country that already had an interstate compact. It was an international compact, which is the treaties, commercial treaties. That's what I was telling you about earlier. It's all about the commercial treaties, and if you're part of it, there's already a hold harmless indemnification plan going on.
Yeah, and that's why I've said to people for a long time. I mean, I remember when I first started studying things and researching like the legal realm and the judicial society, that over and over again, it seemed like every place that I saw that there was any good action taking place, that there was any real success happening, it was happening at an international level. And so that when people were moving things just from the U.S. and trying to get it into an international jurisdiction, they were having a whole lot more success there.
Well, yeah, because it holds a greater, it's a much broader stroke when it comes to the rights of a buyer and seller agreement.
Right. And it's the same thing, like you said, with Mark Twain and Samuel Clemens. Yeah, I think I've noticed, I might be wrong, but I think I've noticed that a lot of authors seem to be releasing their work in other countries before it's released in the U.S. markets. And I don't know if they're following, his lead on that or what, but I just saw that as kind of being interesting.
Well, yeah, what that's doing is it's creating that foreign market before it gets to the American U.S. dollar market where it can monopolize it.
Yep. All right, brother. I'm thinking next week I may go into the topic of the so-called Apostle Paul. I think I've got stuff, kind of put together concise enough, because with Paul and his information, you could spend hours and hours going over it, basically because he just tells you the truth himself if you just listen to him. And especially if you go back and look at that society at that time through the lens of those people, things start making a whole lot more sense and becomes very, very obvious, which to me, I find it very unsettling that American, say, pastors or whatever, for instance, who have gone to seminary, when they went to college, were they doing it just to get the grades and do just what they barely had to do to, get out into the mission field, whether it was the mission field of the USA or abroad, or did they really care? Because when you start looking, for instance, at Paul and what was going on in that era and what was happening with him, and you pay attention to what he's actually saying, it couldn't be more obvious that he was, if anything, at best, a double agent for Rome. and doing exactly what a lot of people today are starting to accuse the churches of, is being nothing but part of that fear and guilt control matrix to keep everybody in line. And
Yeah,
he was doing the same thing then.
well, yeah, that's because they become subject themselves to that commercial merchant contract, and that places that requirement under some kind of lease program to need funding. And that's the plate that they pass around every Sunday, or at the various different events, collecting up this monopolized system of military script people call money in order to keep it running. Church today is thought of as a place, when originally church is a verb, it's an action. When people gather, one or more are gathered in my name, therefore I am. That's church. It's called churching. It's a verb.
But that church originally, the word church even goes back to an ancient Greek god. It was a Cercio or something like that.
Curcio, yep.
Yeah, and so it's like,
Circeo.
yeah, all these things have their origins back further and further than people realize. I heard somebody talking a while ago, and they were saying that they're not even sure if there were any titles for people prior to the citizens of the United States. People didn't even have titles before the United States came along. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I mean, did you ever see Citizen Kane? I mean, uh, in England, the people were all subjects. In fact, you can look up the early U.S. presidents, and it'll show you that they were all born a British subject. So yeah, they had titles even at that time. They were subjects. But you go back even further, go back to the origin of what's being used today in governments, and it's all the Roman system. Everything's based on Rome still. And I would say, that people point at Rome. What people need to realize is that if somebody goes in and conquers a country, um, for instance, let's say a country that's got a king, all right, and you conquer that country. Well, you may have been, say, the president of the conquering country, but when you go in and take over another country, you take on their role, you take on their mantle. And so, no, you're no longer the president in that country, you're king, because that's the way their system works, is king.
Right.
So
It's an occupation now.
when people are all pointing at Rome and the Roman system, they need to realize that there was actually another system that came in and took over Rome and just used those same titles and names and systems as Rome did. So it's actually somebody masquerading. It's always, something a little deeper than what you're seeing at the surface.
Oh yeah, there's all, like you said earlier this evening, it's all multiple layers. That onion again. Oh my God! The more you open it, the more you cry. The more you cry, the more you need to open it so you can quit crying. Because it's destroying that foundation of knowledge. Again, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, and that's the basic principle of the structure of a trust. Is certain people have to have certain knowledge, and there's certain knowledge that you're not supposed to have, and that's that beneficiary name. It's not supposed to be divulged. So the courts are in fact doing that, naming everybody as a trustee, and everybody stepping into that court as a trustee under that presumption. When you learn about the special appearance and its proper presentation, it's the private notification. Matthew 18, verses 15 through 20. When they drag you into those public courts right away, you should know that they're operating as a public trust, and they're naming you as one of the public trustees because they brought you before the court in that capacity. And therefore, there must be an error on the record because they're not supposed to be divulging the identity of the beneficiary. So when you look at the record, you realize they, in fact, did not identify the beneficiary, but they have confused or commingled the identifications and asserted that the living soul benefactor is, in fact, the beneficiary. That's not so. That's the one
Yeah,
thing.
they're putting you in that position, de centort.
Yes, not exactly. Not you're no longer questioning the jurisdiction. You're able to put the primary supplemental facts on the record so that they know that you know, and you're making that specific claim, which Bryan just mentioned, that days on tort. You know, as a beneficiary, they're not supposed to be doing what they're doing. And that is, in fact, under trust law, not just breach, but the further motion of days on tort, knowing so.
Yeah, if you're holding a position that you don't have rightful authority to hold. Exactly. Well, like I tell people every week, learn who you really are, where you're really from, and where you're really at, because that's what you've been deceived on. Figure those things out, and you'll be further ahead than the average bear.
Exactly. And somebody just made a mention in the comment section about ascension, and that's truly what it is. You're notifying the courts that you realize the ascension is yours. That's demanding your birthright as the benefactor for these, as the beneficiary of these accounts, and they've been misdescribing you through misplacements of data elements in the record. And with that, I yield. God bless you.
Absolutely. We'll see you all next week. But along that same line, though, benefactor, why would you want to benefit from anything from a bloodlust system? Period. When your position as benefactor was set up for you while you were still in the womb. Everybody, you have a wonderful week. Thanks, Kieth.